Ni hao annyeong. Hello, I am the Dark Fae, and welcome back to Confessions of a First-Time Dungeon Master. We had our season break, a bit of a holiday break, and now we are back with our season 2 start. So, as always, if you missed the last session, which was quite some time ago, I'll put a link to it up in the corner over here. You can catch up on what you missed. Come back here to find out what happens now in the new season, but I will be giving a recap in just a moment. So we are back with session 44. So without further ado, let's begin. So after I think about a 5-week break, we were now back with our D&D campaign, following the Favorable Five, as my party has now been dubbed. Previously, what had happened was the Favorable Five, with the aid of Neradia, a wizard of the Grim Knives, Verosia, a high-level cleric, and several other Grim Knife agents, they had managed to infiltrate the tower of Master Kane the Frightful, an Oni that was causing problems on the borders of Huscanthan and Prill to the southwest, and who seemed bent on taking territory there. After successfully navigating the maze surrounding the tower, which was filled with this sort of magic scrambling, mind-bending sort of mist, they fought their way through the sewers of the tower up to the cellar, or the dungeon. Transported into prison cells upon entering, the five managed to escape, defeating the jailer and freeing the other prisoners, at least those that were able to keep their wits together. From the jail, they then entered the foyer, which is personally my favorite room, where they were told to face their fears, and did so by doing battle with a stone effigy that came to life when moved onto a magic circle. With the statue crumbled, they continued on to the library, where, after solving the puzzles and clues to gain knowledge, as well as defeating the librarian, they moved on to the kitchen, agreeing to aid the cooks in feeding the master's mysterious pets. They were unfortunately unable to sate its appetite, and it crawled out of the pit to attack these fleshy abominations with eyes and teeth. Overcoming their mind-numbing whispers, their sharp teeth and acidic spit, the party rushed through the next door and found themselves in some sort of a dream, a nightmare, one that held very real consequences and gripped their minds with madness. But upon waking and dealing with the mental assaults that plagued them, the five found some respite in what appeared to be Master Kane's bedchamber, seldom used. Discovering a key through the wardrobe, they entered then a large study filled with different interesting items and contraptions and clues, and a series of puzzles, in fact, that activated the hearth, which transformed to become a grand door to the final room of the tower. With some scouting, they were able to confirm that the Oni was indeed behind these doors, sitting on a throne behind a curious circle of obelisks. The party rushed in, challenging the Oni, and as they moved forward, Kane placed a large, sort of iridescent crystal into the center of the last obelisk, appearing to begin some sort of a magic ritual. Arcs of electricity began to crackle between the obelisks, as the stone itself seemed to start growing, and they began to pulse with the sickly purple light that they had seen previously from the outside of the tower. Combat ensued, and the party quickly discovered that these 4 shadows had attached themselves to the Oni, seeming to aid him in battle by both absorbing attacks and throwing attacks of their own. And the party recognized that these seemed very similar to the statues that they'd seen in the foyer. But as the party attacked, some managing to distract the Oni by attempting to disrupt this magic ritual, eventually the Oni's might proved too great, and Valkyrie, struck by the effigy of death, fell without warning and without explanation. After her death, the Oni seemed to shift his focus to completing his ritual, and inexplicably allowed the party to escape. And the five did so, carrying Valkyrie between them, and rushed to come up with a plan. At first, they took refuge in the now empty library as they witnessed this quaking of the tower. And after some time, Imric was contacted by Naradia, a wizard who had aided them to the tower, who was still down below in the sewers awaiting word. She stated that something worse was happening outside, and that if the five were unable to defeat the Oni now, they should run. So they did. Meeting in the cellars, Naradia was able to teleport them to Lovos to meet with the headmistress and the other ravens of the Grim Knives. Upon explaining what they could of the dire situation, not really letting the Oni do his monologue, but the headmistress immediately called the nation to arms, all focus bent on preventing this now creeping cloud of darkness that billows from the tower, intent on reaching Pearl. And so, this is where our party leaps off. In one of the Grim Knives' many safe houses, kind of stationed around the nation, exhausted, waiting anxiously for any news of the outside. Naradia is there with them, attempting to keep an eye on the outside as well as an ear out for any information. So, the party, after taking a long rest, is sort of deciding what to do and what they can do. Valkyrie is still kind of laying by the hearth, her body still and devoid of life. And so the party then sort of comes together, and they don't really have a clear direction because it has become a bit of a waiting game for what they can do next and kind of the fate, actually, of this nation. So they sort of go about doing some chores, looking around the safe house, as well as kind of assisting Naradia in figuring out what they could of the tower, looking through kind of the notes and the journal that they had gleaned. Naradia, going through them, is able to tell them a little bit about the construction of the effigies and what benefits they sort of afforded Zingane, something they could have discovered earlier and maybe helped them to plan a bit more on how to face him. But she also is able to glean from the journal that Zingane was born, or at least lived, somewhere in the Draxel Mountains to the west of the Blood Lakes, and that one day, when renovating his cavern-like home, one of the tunnels collapsed, and he followed it and encountered what appeared to be an orb. Something that the five is now quite familiar with. So, after some more speculation about that, so sometime late in the afternoon, Naradia receives a message from Ferney that they're sending some more refugees to the safe house, since the safe houses that they have are overflowing and they need the capacity. So in comes a half-elf couple, a family, and also a singular gnome traveling by himself. And this is our new player. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his full name, but his name is Puck, who is I believe, a Mark of Scribing gnome with the Great Old One Warlock class. Which is interesting because there's already a lot of mind stuff going on, so I'm trying to kind of spin his patron and his backstory so that it's not the same as what's happening with Basil and to an extent Ivar, but that will be interesting. So he kind of introduces himself to the rest of the group, stating that he's kind of a fan of theirs and had been kind of hoping to find a party to adventure with, and kind of came to Prill in hopes of like finding them and joining them. And after a little bit of, not hazing, but a bit of an initiation, the individual members kind of gave him a little task. What was it? I think Avar challenged him to a staring contest. Teyral had him throw a dagger, and so on. And he actually rolled very well, so he kind of passed with flying colors. So they agreed to kind of let him join the group for whatever might happen next. At some point, night comes, and in the middle of the night, Neradia goes and wakes everyone up because Ferney has arrived with a few of her agents in tow and has news. So they all gather downstairs, and Ferney sort of informs them that they were able to stop the kind of oncoming rush of darkness, although half of Romir, which is the southwestmost city of Pro, show the map, has been covered, but they were able to seek aid from the mages of Elith Malar, who are quite familiar with throwing barriers against oncoming darkness, and with the help of the Umberlord, who is kind of Basil's master, mentor from the Ironclad Tower, they were able to come up with a solution, but a temporary solution, and that they're working on making it permanent. But the details of that magic, the group and Ferney don't really know and understand, so I'll get into that some other time. So at this point, Ferney kind of introduces one of the agents that she brought with her, whose name is Rutheri, who is a cleric, not under Ferney's command, but one of the Grimknives, and basically offers her services to try and raise Valkyrie from the dead. I should mention that before this, Umric had contacted his patron, but basically he asks Aremsia whether or not they are kind of able to bring back Valkyrie. And the answer that he gets is a bit that, like, Aremsia was not the one to ferry Valkyrie's soul, and that something else may have taken claim of it. And that's what he gets. So, but they try anyway. Rutheri, with the loan of a diamond from Ferney, since they don't have a 500 GP diamond, she starts kind of preparing the ritual. And the way that I'm doing resurrections is pretty much in line with Critical Roles, at least in Campaign 1 that we know of, where Revivify is kind of a rapid resurrection check with this DC that rises every time you have to bring someone back from life. But then rituals have a DC that can be raised or lowered depending on the contributions of the party, because I think that helps with making resurrection and rising from the dead more difficult and more serious a thing, and B, also kind of helps them to maybe, make more connections character-wise. But anyway, they start to prepare. Basil kind of sets the scene by gathering, rotted, vegetation and such to try and kind of mimic Valkyrie's homeland. Teyral is ready to sort of use his sending stone as an offering, since both he and Valkyrie carried one, and sort of use them to communicate. And so with these preparations, then they start the ritual. So, Rutheri begins casting the spell and do a little bit of RP, but basically what happens is the diamond that is being used as the focus for the spell starts to blacken, and a crack actually appears in it, and Rutheri immediately just sort of goes limp, arms kind of hanging at her side, head down, eyes open and wide as the kind of dawn, the light of dawn, dims almost back to nighttime. Shadows start to grow, and from Rutheri's shadow up comes a tall elven woman, long kind of swirling hair around her like ink, 2 pairs of dark eyes, and like long, thin, bony fingers. And she greets them all. And this is an avatar, or a sort of personification of none other than Wystria, the goddess of madness. And her voice is like 2 different voices overlapping, one like high and chilling, the other kind of very deeper and like menacing. And basically she tells them, "Hello there. So, you'd like to bring back your friend? I'm afraid I have possession of her soul now, and I will not allow you to simply take her." So, she kind of reveals that she's been following them around for a little bit, hinting that because they took the orb from the drowned guardian, she has been able to sort of spy on what they've been doing and what they've been saying and planning, until, that is, Ferney took it from their possession. And so Wystria offers them a deal. If they want Valhyrie's soul back, they have a couple of options of what they can do for her. 1, they can go visit a very loyal friend somewhere up in the north in Hasdauer Minok, the Sunless Battlefields. Or 2, they can visit her home plane, the Nightmare Plane, and deal with a creature that is trying to spread light and joy before it goes insane and bring it to her. Terral asks if there's any other option, and actually I was thinking like, oh, there was actually something I could have offered them that maybe I should have, but I had him roll persuasion. He rolled like a 20, I think, and I was like, you know what, yeah, it would make sense. So her third option is a bit cryptic, is a task that they have already been given. So she gives them about a day to decide, gives them a kind of a token of this black kind of glassy round stone, to contact her once they have decided whether or not they want to make this deal. And after Ferney makes sure that it's legit, she sinks back kind of into the shadow. The light kind of gathers back into the room, and Ruthari comes back to herself, very disturbed and not happy. So after some discussion, and also Basil contacting the Umberlord for help, since the Umberlord is kind of the reigning authority on how to deal with Wystria. They try to discuss what's going on. And behind the scenes, ordinarily I am sort of I prefer like a character death to be, important and permanent if they really don't have the means to bring somebody back in time. But because this was kind of a sudden occurrence, and I know that my player loves her character, Valhyrie, it's like, okay, if the party agrees, like, this is something that they could do in order to bring someone back. So, after some discussion, bringing the Umberlord at dawn about, which is when he's done with his whole ritual of finishing kind of the barrier against the darkness, he kind of comes and tries to offer them some advice about what to do. And because they don't want to necessarily make a deal with Wystria if they can avoid it, and so their thought was kind of to maybe go after St. Kane and then kind of gain the upper hand on Wystria, sort of. And so this is kind of the weird part for me, because I am playing both Wystria and like the Umberlord Asmodeum, who they have a very complicated relationship. So it's like I'm trying to outsmart myself and like playing chess against myself, and it's very strange. But the best that I could think, at least, not that I'm trying to like railroad them into doing this, but if they want Valhyrie's soul back, they don't really have an option. Like, because Sincain won and Wystria won, they sort of have the upper hand, and it would be like exceedingly difficult for them to find a way that where they could gain the advantage without her either doing something horrible to Valkyrie's soul or furthering her own plans and somehow destroying something that they care about. Like, also, I know, like, after our season end, we had like a bit of a discussion about like how the campaign is going, and I know that they generally need a little bit more guidance, a little bit more kind of like hand-holdy about like what to do. But I also don't want to be the one like railroading them or kind of telling them like this is the only way to do things and it's like my way, because if they find a way to outsmart me, outthink me, good for them. I want them to do it. But so the Umber Lord kind of gives them advice, or at least both like the merits and like the not so great parts of each of the choices. So her very loyal friend, someone that he's kind of heard of, is a hag that's living somewhere up in Hasdar Minok named Baba Sundra. And while hags are very dangerous creatures, and she will probably, to make a deal with her, they'd probably have to give something up in equal measure. On the other hand, she does probably have a lot of information about Wystria's goals or aims and like what's what in that realm. So she could get information, or they could get information from her. For going to the Nightmare Plane, well, that's a whole level of dangerous, since the Nightmare Plane, people can go insane pretty easily, even with Wystria's like allowance to be there. But that quest probably would not take as long, and it does not involve like really any travel, because Wystria had promised that she would just take them there, essentially. And then thirdly, the task that's already been done. She looked at Basil and Ivar, she said that, and they kind of pieced together that that would probably be hunting down the Warforged that Basil and Ivar had originally been tasked with by the mages of Aleth Malar. And I don't know if they've really put together why that is something Wystria would want them to do. Asmodeum knows, but he has like a magical binding, basically, that doesn't allow him to talk specifically about the orbs. He tries at one point to tell them more information, and he immediately is like cut off with these kind of like invisible hands almost seem to start like choking him, and he takes some psychic damage. And that is something there. But he does advise them that maybe try to resist any compulsions to destroy more orbs, because it's actually maybe not a good thing if they are destroyed. So, but it's also maybe one of the only ways that Basil can get rid of his ring. So it's kind of a toss-up. And I'm actually very curious to see how it's gonna play out, because they decided that they want to go and hunt down the Warforged, who is currently somewhere, actually also up north, heading to the Frigid Wastes, which is kind of north of where Baba Sundra lives. And that's the decision they made before we kind of cut it. And that's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be fun. I've never done a frozen wasteland like quest, even though I've seen many, and I'm actually in one in another campaign. So there's a lot of nuances, I think, and I'm actually wondering like how much, like what path they want to take after finding out some of this new information. Oh, but also with them now deciding on their quest. Ferney instructs one of her agents to accompany them, Beravin, or I think that's how the name has changed a lot. But this is the player who used to play Valkyrie, her kind of new temporary character. Or so that she has someone to play while going on this quest to revive her original character, and hopefully it goes well and she'll be back to playing Valkyrie in a few sessions. But they are I believe an elven arcane trickster rogue, so I had to kind of give a specific character kind of because they are Grimknife, they would be under Zenaria, and there's kind of restrictions as to what subclass they can be, but I kind of let her choose between rogue or cleric or wizard, and that's what she chose. So it'll be interesting what the new kind of party dynamic is going to be like, because now combat's all different now that they have another spellcaster, but then are down a spellcaster from their druid. Although Arcane Trickster has some spells, so it'll be good, I think. But yeah, there's a lot happening now, and we're getting very far, I think, into Ivar and Basil's story, and I'm trying to throw in a little bit of everyone else's story, but first I gotta bring back Valkyrie and then find out how to deal with Sinkane. So yeah, that's where they're at now. So it was nice to be back. I would say even after 5 weeks, because sometimes I feel a little burned out or a bit like not into the story. After 5 weeks, I found out that I actually did miss DMing, so that was kind of nice. But that is it for this session. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for notifications when I put out new videos. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!